I kept my wishes on cassette tapes, not because I was nostalgic, but because cassettes were cheap and hard to erase by accident. In the drawer beneath my soldering iron, I stacked them by year, each one labeled with a date and a single word in blocky marker. Safe. Learn. Stay. Open. I never played them aloud when anyone was around. The floating district taught you early that if you said you wanted something, the sea would hear you and decide how much to charge. So I whispered my wishes into plastic shells and tucked them away like contraband. My first tape was recorded when I was 9 on a scavenged handheld recorder that still smelled faintly of mold. The background hiss ate most of my voice, but I could still hear the words if I pressed the speaker to my ear. I wish the water won't rise into our room tonight. I wish my brother won't go out on the roofs. I wish my mother will come back from the clinic. I did not say I wished for a father. I had already learned not to bargain for things the world had never offered. The floating district was a city of patched pontoons and bruised metal. Our homes were old shipping containers welded to barrels, connected by narrow walkways that swayed even on calm days. When storms came, the walkways became ropes you clung to with both hands, pretending your fear was just cold. We lived close enough to hear our neighbors sneeze through the thin walls. We lived far enough from the glass towers of Upper Bay that their lights looked like a second constellation, too steady to be real. My mother, Syra, ran a tiny clinic in a shipping container painted white. She treated coughs and cuts, stitched fishermen, and scrubbed algae out of children's ears. When people didn't have credits, she accepted fish, labor, or a promise. She believed in promises the way other people believed in insurance. I used to watch her hands strong, careful, always moving while I waited on the clinic step and tried to decode the city's rules. On the day she didn't come home, the fog rolled in so thick the docks vanished. My brother Juno climbed the roof and shouted that the sea had swallowed the lights. I was 13. I held my cassette recorder like a talisman and told myself if I captured the moment precisely enough, it wouldn't be able to hurt us twice. She arrived after midnight, soaked, shaking, her lips blue from cold. She didn't collapse. Not then. She just sat at our rickety table and looked at the three of us, Juno, me, and little Nyla, like she was memorizing us for later. "They're closing the clinic," she said. "Not our clinic. All of them down here." Her voice was flat, the kind of flat that meant she had already argued until her throat went raw. "Who is they?" Juno demanded, as if a pronoun could be punched. "Bay Authority," she said, "and a company with a new name, Saltline Logistics. They want the pontoons moved. They say it's for safety. They say they'll relocate us." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. They didn't say where. The next week was a blur of notices and meetings, of men in clean jackets speaking in polite sentences that sounded like threats. They offered buyouts that wouldn't cover a month of rent in Upper Bay. They offered temporary shelters on land warehouses with rows of cots and lights that never dimmed. My mother took me to every meeting. She said, "Listen, Mara. Learn how they twist words. Words are tools. So are wires. So are hands." I learned. I learned that paperwork could drown you faster than water. I learned that the Bay Authority had already signed a contract, and our protests were just noise to fill the time until the cranes arrived. I learned that promises made to poor people were like tape on a leak good for a day, maybe. And then the pressure changed. On the morning the first crane came, my mother dragged a suitcase into our kitchen and told us to pack. "We're leaving before they force us," she said. "We're going inland. We'll start again." Juno exploded. Nyla cried. I didn't say anything. I went to my drawer, pulled out a tape, and recorded a new wish. "I wish we can leave without losing ourselves." We never left that day. Juno ran out, furious, and didn't come back before the storm hit. The crane operator fled. The pontoons bucked. A walkway snapped and 2 containers slammed into each other like angry ships. I remember my mother's hands gripping mine so tight my fingers ached. "Stay with me," she kept saying, as if she could command the sea through sheer insistence. They found Juno at dawn, clinging to a buoy, half-conscious, salt-crusted. The relief in my chest was so strong it almost felt like pain. My mother carried him inside with help from neighbors. She worked on him for hours, warming him, coaxing his breath back into rhythm. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at her and tried to grin. "Still here," he rasped. My mother's face hardened then, not at him but at the world. That afternoon she marched to the Bay Authority office on land, the one we were never invited into. She took me with her. She wore her clinic coat like armor. In the lobby, a guard tried to stop her and she said, "I am a doctor. If you put your hands on me, You will regret the infection." We never made it past the lobby. A representative came down instead, smiling like he was doing us a favor. He offered her a contract, a job in a private clinic up in Upper Bay. Better equipment, better pay. "Your skills are wasted on the pontoons," he said. "Come where you can do real good." My mother looked at the contract and then at me. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She loved us. She loved her patients. She loved the district. She also loved the idea of being able to buy Nyla fruit without checking prices and to pay off the debt on Juno's rescue. "If I take this," she asked, "what happens to my people?" The representative didn't blink. "Relocation proceeds as planned," he said. "But you'll be secure. Your family will be secure." He slid a pen across the counter like it was a gift. My mother didn't sign. She pushed the paper back. "Secure for who?" she said. "For the ones who can afford silence?" She turned and walked out, shoulders square. In the elevator, I watched her reflection in the metal walls, jaw clenched, eyes wet but not falling. That was the day I understood my mother's courage wasn't loud. It was stubborn. It was choosing the hard thing again and again because the easy thing tasted like betrayal. A month later, she collapsed anyway. It happened on a warm afternoon when the air smelled briefly like summer. The clinic container was crowded. A child had a fever. An old man had a wound that wouldn't close. My mother moved between them. Calm, efficient. I was in the corner fixing a broken lamp. Because light was currency in the floating district and nothing stayed fixed for long. She stood up too quickly, swayed, and then her knees hit the floor with a sound I still hear when I'm half asleep. We got her to land. The hospital in Upper Bay was bright, clean, and cold. They took her into a room behind a door I wasn't allowed to enter. Juno paced. Nyla clutched my sleeve. I held my cassette recorder in my pocket until my palms sweated. A doctor with careful eyes came out and told us my mother had a heart condition she'd been ignoring for years. "Stress," he said, as if stress was a weather pattern and not a policy. He said she needed surgery. He said the cost. The number landed between us like a boulder. I did what I always did when there was no room left to panic. I started counting options. We could borrow from neighbors, but they were drowning too. We could sell our container, but no one would buy it with cranes on the horizon. We could take the Bay Authority's relocation payment, but it was a joke. Juno talked about stealing, about breaking into the authorities' warehouse. My stomach twisted at the thought of him disappearing again, this time into prison. In the end, the help came from a place so absurd it felt like the sea mocking us. I met him behind a fried algae stand at the night market on Dock 7. The market was a tangle of lights and music and shouting, the kind of chaos where you could forget your own hunger for a minute. I was there because I'd taken a side job repairing comm radios for fishermen. My hands smelled like solder and fish oil. I was exhausted, angry, and determined not to cry in public. A boy stumbled into me, nearly knocking my tool bag into a puddle. "Sorry," he said, too loud. His hair was dark and wet, not from rain but from the way the air clung to everything down here. He wore an expensive jacket that didn't belong in the floating district. His eyes were sharp in the wrong way, sharp like someone used to winning arguments without trying. He looked at my bag, at the wires poking out, and grinned. "You fix things?" he asked, as if the idea delighted him. "Move," I said, and tried to step around him. He matched my step. "I need something fixed," he said. "A promise." I stopped. "Promises aren't electronics." "They are if you record them," he said, nodding toward the cassette recorder clipped to my belt. My face flushed. I had forgotten it was visible. I reached to cover it, defensive. "It's none of your business." He raised his hands in surrender. "Fair," he said. "I'll trade. I'll give you something if you do me a favor." I should have walked away. Any sane person would have. But desperation makes you listen to strange offers. "What favor?" I asked. He pulled a small data chip from his pocket and held it between thumb and forefinger like a coin. "I lost a bet," he said. "I have to give the first person I bump into 10,000 credits. You, please take it, so I can go home and sleep." 10,000 credits wasn't surgery money, but it was enough to keep the hospital from kicking my mother out while we scrambled for the rest. I stared at the chip, convinced it had to be fake. "Why would you bet that?" I demanded. He shrugged. "Because my friends are idiots, and I'm bored," he said. The words were casual, but something in his posture was tight, like a string pulled too far. "Take it," he repeated, softer. I'm not allowed to break my word. It's a family rule. I took the chip. My fingers trembled. This isn't a favor, I said. This is... Don't say pity, he snapped, and then immediately looked annoyed at himself. Say deal. I like deals. A deal, I echoed, because it was easier than gratitude. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing as if he could see my thoughts. What do you want for real? He asked. Not the polite answer. The one you whisper into that recorder. The market noise blurred. For a second, I could only hear the hiss of tape in my memory. I thought of my mother in a hospital bed under sterile lights. I thought of the cranes. I thought of Juno's half-mad plan to steal. I want her to live, I said. The words tasted like iron. The boy's expression shifted, the grin gone. He nodded once, almost solemn. Okay, he said. Then make the deal with me. Take the chip. Don't ask me questions. And if anyone asks, tell them you found it. He turned and disappeared into the crowd before I could argue. That night, I recorded a wish on a new tape. I wish the C's jokes come with instructions. The 10,000 credits became a bridge. We borrowed the rest from a cooperative that loaned to district families at merciless interest, because merciless was still better than impossible. My mother survived surgery. She woke up weak but alive, her hand squeezing mine with stubborn strength. Don't let them move you without a fight, she whispered. While she recovered, I took every job I could, repairing radios, rewiring solar panels, fixing old desalination pumps. I became good at making broken things behave. It felt like a kind of prayer that didn't require believing in anything but physics. I did not expect to see the boy again. 2 years passed. The cranes came in phases, like tides. Some people took the relocation money and left. Some chained themselves to their containers. Some vanished at night, fleeing before the authority could stamp them with new IDs. Our little clinic held on because my mother refused to give it up, even when her hands shook and her scars ached. She trained volunteers. She taught Nyla how to wrap bandages and Juno how to keep records. She taught me how to read a person's fear by the way they held their shoulders. I started a repair shop in a storage container near Dock 9. The sign said Mara's Fixes in uneven paint. People brought me broken speakers, broken chargers, broken drones that delivered medicine. Sometimes they brought me broken stories too, and sat on my crate stool while I worked and talked like confession could be soldered into place. On an afternoon when the sun hit the water just right and made the district look almost beautiful, a man walked into my shop and asked for a job. He was older than the boy I remembered, or maybe just sharpened by loss. His hair was cut short. His clothes were plain. He carried a backpack that looked too light for someone who had nowhere else to put his life. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Then he smiled, half a challenge, half an apology, and the memory snapped into place like a plug in a socket. You, I said, stupidly. Me, he agreed. Hi, Mara, I stared. How do you know my name? He nodded toward a battered radio on my counter. Your shop is named after you, he said, as if that explained everything. Then he hesitated, and the hesitation was new. Also, I've been looking. Why? The word came out harsher than I intended. He exhaled. Because I owe you, he said. And because I ran out of other places to go. I crossed my arms. You gave me money, I said. That's not debt. That's a weird night. Still debt, he insisted, eyes steady. My name is Elias Hart. I used to be someone. He made a face like the title tasted bad. Now I'm not. I can work. I can clean. I can carry boxes. I can learn. The name hit me like a wave. Hart. The Harts owned half of Upper Bay, their logo stamped on cargo drones and tower facades. Saltline Logistics belonged to them, the company that wanted to move us. My throat tightened. Why are you here? I repeated, quieter, because suddenly the air felt thin. Elias didn't look away. Because my father is in prison, he said. Because the company is collapsing, he said. Because the location is a lie, and I helped build the lie without knowing it. His jaw flexed. And because someone tried to kill me when I started asking questions. My shop was too small for that kind of sentence. I could hear the district outside, children yelling, engines sputtering, water slapping metal like the world refusing to pause for his confession. I should have told him to leave. I should have slammed the door. Instead, I heard my mother's voice in my head. Listen, study the way they bend words. Elias's words didn't twist. They dropped heavy and ugly. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "A job," he said. "And a place to be useful." "You expect me to trust you?" "No," he said, "but I'm asking anyway." I stared at him until my eyes watered. Finally, I said, 4 hours a day. Cash. No promises. He nodded like he'd been granted mercy. "Deal," he said, and the word sounded different now, less like a game, more like a lifeline. Elias proved surprisingly good with his hands. He listened when I explained circuits. He learned to strip wire without nicking it. He showed up on time, even when the docks were slick with rain. He ate whatever food we had without complaint. He slept in the storage room behind my shop on a cot I built from scrap. The first week, he barely spoke. The second week, he started asking questions not about me, but about the district, about how we kept the pontoons balanced, about the co-op loans, about why the water near Dock 12 glowed faintly at night. "Runoff from the desal plant?" I told him. "Or something worse." He frowned. "The desal plant is owned by Saltline," he said. "I know," I said. "Everything is." He flinched as if I'd slapped him, then nodded. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "That's the problem." My mother met Elias on a day she was strong enough to walk down the docks. She came into my shop with Nyla, her scarf wrapped tight, her eyes bright with suspicion. Elias stood so straight I thought he might snap. "This is the boy," my mother said, before I could introduce him. "The one who paid the sea's toll." Elias blinked. "You remember?" My mother smiled without warmth. "I remember every hand that reaches for my children," she said. "For good or for harm." Elias swallowed. "I meant it for good," he said. "Intent doesn't keep roofs from collapsing," she replied. Then she stepped closer, studying him. "But guilt can make a man useful," she added, and turned away as if the verdict was already decided. After that, Elias became part of our strange little household, orbiting my repair shop and my mother's clinic. He fixed shelves. He helped Juno haul supplies. He made Nyla laugh by folding bits of wire into tiny animals. He never once spoke about Upper Bay unless I asked, and even then he chose his words carefully, like he was afraid of sharpening them into weapons. One night, after we closed the shop, I found him sitting on the dock edge, staring at the tower lights across the water. He looked small against the dark. I sat beside him, legs dangling over the black surface. The water smelled like engine oil and seaweed. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Why did you really come here?" He didn't answer immediately. His fingers picked at a frayed strap on his backpack. "When I was 17, he said finally. "I thought money was proof that the world made sense. If you had enough, problems turned into transactions. People thanked you. Doors opened. You didn't have to feel helpless." He laughed softly. "I was so proud of not feeling helpless." "And now?" I asked. "Now I know helplessness is just honesty," he said. "And I'm surrounded by it. The district is honest. Upper Bay is a performance." I watched the tower lights ripple on the water, distorted by waves. "So you're here to perform honesty?" I asked, bitter. Elias shook his head. "I'm here because I saw a list," he said, voice low. "A relocation schedule. It wasn't relocation. It was clearance. They're planning to sink sections of the floating district under the pretext of structural collapse. Insurance payouts. Legal language. A natural disaster they can claim wasn't their fault." My stomach turned. "That's impossible," I whispered, because the alternative was too large. "It's not impossible," he said. "It's profitable." I stared at him. "Do you have proof?" I asked. He tapped his backpack. "Not enough. Yet." In the weeks that followed, our lives shifted from survival to resistance, though we never used the word. Resistance sounded like banners and speeches, like something heroes did. We were not heroes. We were tired people trying to keep our homes afloat. But Elias brought a kind of dangerous clarity. He knew where Saltline stored their data. He knew which contractors were bribed and which were scared. He knew how Bay Authority reports were written to hide violence behind passive verbs. We started small. We mapped water quality with sensors built from scavenged parts. We recorded the glow near Dock 12 and traced it to a pipe that shouldn't have existed. We found dead fish with strange burns. My mother treated rashes that wouldn't heal. "Chemical exposure," she muttered, and her eyes went hard. "They're poisoning us to make us leave." Elias helped me build a transmitter for community radio, a station we could broadcast from anywhere on the pontoons. If they control the official channels, he said, we make our own. Juno, who had always been a storm looking for a sky, threw himself into it. He organized meetings. He taught neighbors how to document repairs and report harassment. Nyla painted posters with bright colors and huge letters. We are not driftwood. For the first time in years, the district felt less like a sinking boat and more like a body with a heartbeat. Saltline noticed. It began with drones hovering too low over Dock 9, then with inspectors appearing in pairs, smiling too much, asking questions about my shop's wiring permits. Then with a letter slid under my door. Notice of compliance review. The letter had no signature, only a seal. Elias read it, and his face went pale. They're testing you, he said. Let them, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I fix radios. What can they do? Elias's gaze flicked to my drawer. They can take what you love, he said quietly. They can make you choose between safety and truth. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my cot upstairs in the clinic container, listening to the water slap and the wind rattle metal. I reached into my bag and pulled out my cassette recorder. I didn't make a new wish. I played an old one, a tape labeled Open, recorded when I was 15 after my mother's surgery. The hiss filled my ears, and then my younger voice. I wish I can keep the door open when it would be easier to shut it. I stared at the ceiling and wondered what the sea would charge for that wish. 2 days later, the first sabotage hit. A surge fried the clinic's solar inverter, killing power to the fridge that stored vaccines. My mother swore in a language she rarely used. I rebuilt the inverter overnight from spare parts. Elias stood beside me holding a flashlight, jaw clenched. They did this, he said. Prove it, I replied. Because proof was the only shield we had. We set a trap. We rewired a decoy inverter with a hidden recorder and old audio module connected to a camera lens salvaged from a drone. If someone tampered with it, we'd catch them. On the third night, the camera recorded 2 figures in Bay Authority jackets cutting wires with practiced hands. Their faces were hidden by caps, but one of them spoke, and the voice was clear. Hurry, Saltline wants it messy. Make it look like neglect. We played the recording over community radio the next morning. The district erupted. People gathered on the docks. They shouted at authority boats. They demanded names. Upper Bay news stations tried to ignore us, but our broadcast leaked into their frequencies like salt into fresh water. Someone clipped our audio and posted it. It spread. Saltline responded with a public statement. Unverified footage circulated by unauthorized broadcasters. They promised an investigation. They blamed agitators. They offered a new relocation package for the safety of residents. My mother spat into the water. They think we're stupid, she said. They think we're tired. Elias corrected. We were tired, but we were also furious, and fury was fuel. Elias proposed something bigger. We need the master plan, he said. The clearance schedule, the insurance filings, the contractor payments, all of it. Then we take it to a court that can't pretend it doesn't exist. And where do we get it? Juno asked, eyes bright. From Saltline servers? Elias nodded. There's a data hub on Pier 40, he said. Old warehouse. Restricted. I can get us in. My blood turned cold. Us? I echoed. Elias looked at me. You built the radio, he said. You understand the systems. I can't do it alone. My mother's gaze flicked between us. This is dangerous, she said. They already tried to break you. They will try harder. I know, I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. But I also know what happens if we do nothing. We planned for a week. We learned the patrol routes. We built a jammer the size of a lunchbox. We disguised ourselves in maintenance coveralls. Nyla begged to come, and my mother nearly grounded her for life. On the night we moved, fog rolled in again, thick as memory. We took a small boat across the channel, engines low. The pier loomed, skeletal cranes and dark warehouses rising out of the mist. Elias navigated without hesitation. I grew up here, he murmured, before I knew what it cost. We docked under a shadow and climbed onto the pier. The warehouse door had a keypad. Elias punched in a code. The light blinked green. The door sighed open. Inside, the air smelled like dust and cold metal. Rows of server racks hummed behind a glass partition. A single security camera tracked movement lazily, its red eye sweeping the room. I held my breath. Elias crouched, opened his jammer, and flipped a switch. The camera's eye blinked, stuttered, and froze. We moved fast. I connected my drive to a port on the main console. Lines of code flickered. Files streamed. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might trip an alarm by vibration alone. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on." Elias stood watch, shoulders tight. Juno hovered near the door, gripping a wrench like a weapon. The minutes stretched. The servers kept humming, indifferent. Then a distant thud echoed through the warehouse. Footsteps. "Someone's coming," Juno hissed. "Almost done," I said, eyes locked on the progress bar. 90%. 92. 95. The footsteps grew louder. A flashlight beam sliced under the door. Elias's hand touched my shoulder. Warm and steady. "Pull now," he whispered. "No," I said, teeth clenched. "We need the full set." The door handle rattled. 98. A voice outside. "Maintenance? Who's in there?" Elias stepped toward the door and called back. Voice smooth. "Authorized check. Sensor glitch. We'll file report." There was a pause. The kind where a man decides whether to believe you. 100%. I yanked the drive free. "Go," I breathed. We ran. The guard burst in just as we reached the pier edge. He shouted. Another voice joined, then another. Lights snapped on across the pier like startled fish. A siren began to wail. We leapt into the boat. Juno gunned the engine. The boat lurched, spraying cold water. A drone whined overhead, spotlight stabbing the fog. Elias grabbed the rail and yanked a tarp up, throwing shadow over us. The drone's light swept, searching. My hands shook as I clutched the drive to my chest. A shot cracked. The sound was wrong in the fog. Too clean. The boat jolted. Elias grunted, stumbled, and collapsed against me. For a second, my mind refused to process it. Then my fingers came away wet. "No," I whispered, horrified. "No." Elias's face was pale. "Keep going," he rasped. "Don't stop." Juno swore and pushed the engine harder. The drone's light faded behind us as the fog swallowed it. We made it back to Dock 9 with sirens still distant, echoes on water. My mother met us at the dock, eyes wide. When she saw Elias's blood, she moved like lightning, hands sure to spite fear. We dragged him into the clinic. Nyla held towels. Juno paced, shaking. My mother pressed gauze to the wound. "Bullet grazed," she muttered. "Not deep, but he's losing blood." Elias's eyes fluttered. He tried to focus on me. "You got it?" he whispered. I held up the drive, tears blurring it into a smear of light. "Yes," I choked. "We got it." He exhaled, a faint smile touching his lips, and then his eyes rolled back. His body went limp. For 3 days, Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, feverish and silent. The clinic hummed with whispered conversations, with neighbors bringing soup and bandages, with the district's collective fear pressing against the walls. Saltline issued a statement about criminal trespass. The Bay Authority announced increased patrols. Drones hovered over docks like vultures. On the 4th day, Elias stopped waking. My mother checked his pulse, her face grim. "He's alive," she said. "But he's sinking inward. Shock. Infection. He needs a real hospital." "A real hospital will ask questions," Juno snapped. "They'll hand him to the authority." My mother's eyes flashed. "Then we make it impossible for them to hide him," she said. "We go public." That was when the cassette tapes stopped being secrets. I brought my recorder to Elias's bedside. I played him the audio from Dock 7, the night market, his voice telling me not to say pity. Then I played him our community radio broadcasts. Then I played him my wishes, one by one, not all of them, but the ones that mattered. Safe, learn, stay, open. My voice over the years, raw and small and stubborn, filled the clinic like a tide. "If you can hear me," I whispered, leaning close, "then you know I don't make wishes lightly. So hear this one. I wish you come back." My mother squeezed my shoulder. Juno stood at the door, eyes shining with helpless anger. Nyla sat on the floor drawing waves that turned into wings. On the 6th day, we released the Saltline files. We did it through every channel we had: community radio, mirrored uploads, physical printouts taped to docks. The files showed everything: the clearance schedule, the planned sinkings timed to storm season, the chemical runoff routed into district water, the bribes to inspectors, The drafted press releases calling deaths unfortunate incidents. There were emails with my mother's clinic name listed under non-essential infrastructure. There was a map with our home highlighted in red. The city could not pretend it was unverified. Journalists from outside the Bay arrived, hungry for scandal. Environmental agencies demanded access. A judge issued an emergency injunction against further relocation actions pending investigation. Salt line stock plummeted. The Bay Authority director resigned on camera, eyes hollow. Upper Bay lights flickered that night. Not physically, but in the way people looked at them. They seemed less like constellations and more like bait. Salt line fought back, of course. They claimed hacking. They claimed forged documents. They hired lawyers with smiles sharper than knives. But too many pieces fit. Too many residents had rashes and dead fish and broken inverters. The truth had momentum. In the middle of it all, Elias lay still. When the first hearing began, my mother stood at a podium in a borrowed suit and spoke calmly about stress and heart conditions and children coughing up metal-tasting phlegm. She held up a jar of glowing water from Dock 12 and said, "This is not an accident. This is a choice." The room went silent. That evening, as the district gathered around radios to listen to updates, I sat beside Elias and held his hand. His skin was warm now, fever easing under antibiotics, but his grip was slack. I felt like I was holding on to someone, slipping through my fingers like seawater. "I don't know if you deserve forgiveness," I murmured, "but I know you deserve to live long enough to try." The clinic door creaked. Juno stepped in, eyes red from too little sleep. "They raided Pier 40, he said. "They're arresting workers, people who didn't even know what they were guarding. They're desperate." "They'll come here," I said. Juno nodded. "We're moving, Elias," he said. Tonight, we built a stretcher from a door. We wrapped Elias in blankets. We carried him through back alleys of the floating district, while drones hummed overhead and neighbors dimmed their lights in solidarity. We moved him to an abandoned barge near the mangroves, a place the authority boats couldn't reach without scraping their hulls. The barge smelled like rust and old beer. We turned one cabin into a makeshift recovery room. In that cabin, with the mangroves whispering outside, I recorded a new tape. I labeled it Name. I pressed record and said, "Elias Hart, Mara Saito. We are real. We are not paperwork. We are not collateral." I didn't play it. I tucked it into my pocket like a vow. Days blurred. The investigation widened. Salt line executives were subpoenaed. A whistleblower surfaced, confirming the sinkings were planned. Upper Bay residents who had never noticed us began to talk about the floating district, like it was a stain they couldn't scrub away. Some offered help. Some offered pity. I hated both. I wanted justice, not charity. One stormy night, the authority came anyway. We heard the boats first. Engines cutting through mangrove shallows, scraping, grinding. Flashlights pierced the rain. "Search," a voice shouted. "Find the data drive! Find Hart!" Juno cursed. My mother grabbed her medical bag. Nyla clutched my waist, trembling. I stared at Elias on the cot. He looked peaceful, too still. "Wake up," I whispered fiercely. "Wake up now." The boats thudded against the barge. Boots clanged on metal. The cabin door rattled. My mother raised her chin. "No matter what," she said, voice low. "You keep the files safe. You keep Nyla safe. Understand?" I nodded, throat tight. The door burst open. 2 officers in Bay Authority gear stormed in, rain dripping off their helmets. Their eyes swept the room and landed on Elias. One of them smiled, ugly. "There he is," he said. Juno stepped forward, wrench in hand. "Back off," he snarled. The officer lifted a stun baton. "Move," he said. In that moment, everything in me went cold and sharp. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cassette recorder. My fingers found the tape labeled Open. I didn't think. I pressed play and shoved the recorder toward the officers. My 15-year-old voice hissed into the cabin. "I wish I can keep the door open when it would be easier to shut it." The officer blinked, confused. "What is this?" "It's evidence," I said, voice steady. "It's a record of what you did, of what you're about to do." He laughed. "A child's tape?" I raised my chin. "Not just that," I said. "There's a transmitter on this barge. There are cameras. There are hundreds of listeners. If you touch him, if you touch any of us, the whole bay will hear you." The officer's smile faltered. He glanced at his partner. Outside, voices shouted, arguing someone had noticed our radio signal and the drones above were suddenly broadcasting it, their hacked frequencies bleeding our warning across the mangroves. Juno had rigged the jammer to our antenna. The district had learned, fast, how to turn their tools back on them. The officer stepped closer anyway, baton raising. Elias's hand moved. It was tiny, a twitch, but I saw it like lightning. His fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then sharpened just enough to find my face. "Mara," he whispered, voice ragged. The officer froze. "He's awake," he said, surprised. Elias's gaze shifted to the baton, to the authority patch. Something like fury flickered in his eyes. He tried to sit up and winced. "You don't get to," he rasped. "Clean this up." I didn't know if he meant the raid or his family's sins. Maybe both. Behind the officers, a different voice shouted from the deck. "Stand down. Cameras are live. Retreat." For a second, the officers hesitated, pride wrestling with caution. Then the first officer spat on the floor, grabbed Elias's old ID bracelet from the cot, and stormed out. The cabin door slammed. Boots retreated. Engines roared away into the rain. Angry and defeated, silence fell, except for the storm and Elias's uneven breathing. I collapsed onto the cot edge, shaking. Elias's eyes stayed on me. "You," he whispered, as if the word carried 1,000 unfinished sentences. "I'm here," I said, tears spilling. "I'm here," he swallowed, struggling. "Did we do it?" he asked. "We did," I said. "We cracked it open. They can't pretend anymore." His eyes closed for a second. When they opened again, they were wet. "Good," he breathed, because I kept thinking, if I die, it's just another convenient accident. "You're not dying," I snapped, too sharp. "You don't get to leave and make me carry this alone." A faint, tired smile tugged his mouth. "Bossy," he murmured. "Stubborn," I corrected, and it was the closest thing to a joke we'd had in weeks. After that night, the raids stopped. The Bay Authority shifted tactics, trying to salvage public perception. Salt Line's board fired executives in a cascade. Elias was called to testify, and for the first time I saw him in a courtroom, pale but standing, his hands not shaking. He spoke about contracts and cover-ups and the way the company used the word safety, like a mask. He didn't beg for sympathy. He didn't pretend ignorance absolved him. He said, "I benefited. I didn't ask why. That was a choice." The judge listened. The city listened. The injunction became a permanent halt. The chemical pipe at Dock 12 was sealed and investigated. Cleanup crews arrived, watched carefully by district volunteers. A new clinic fund was established, not as charity but as restitution. The court's language sharp. The floating district wasn't saved like a storybook ending. It was still poor. It still shook in storms, but it was no longer invisible. My mother, sitting on our clinic step, breathed easier for the first time in years. "We made them see," she said. "And you taught us how." I replied. Elias stayed in the district even when he could have left. Offers came law firms, investigative agencies, even a few Upper Bay politicians smelling opportunity. He refused them all. He worked in my shop, sweeping, soldering, learning. He helped Juno set up a training program for kids to repair solar panels and radios, because skill was power. He taught Nyla to solder without burning her fingers. He learned to laugh again, quietly, like someone testing whether joy was safe. One evening, months after the hearing, we sat on the dock with bowls of hot noodle soup. The sun sank behind the towers, painting the water copper. The district around us glowed with new lights, small solar lamps people had installed after our radio program started sharing designs. Elias nudged my shoulder. "Do you still make tapes?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes," I admitted. "What's the newest one?" he asked. I stared at the horizon, at the line where water met sky. "Name?" I said. "And another." "What does it say?" he asked, voice careful, not prying. I pulled the recorder from my pocket. The plastic was scuffed, the buttons worn. I pressed play. Static hissed. Then my own voice from 2 nights ago, recorded in the quiet after Nyla fell asleep and the clinic finally went still. "I wish the things we build together can outlast the storms. I wish I can stop measuring love like debt. I wish I can be brave enough to be happy. Elias's breath caught. He looked at me like I'd turned a light on in a room he'd been afraid to enter. That's a big wish, he said softly. I'm tired of small ones, I said, and my voice shook but didn't break. He reached for my hand, slow, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers were warm and callous now, not the soft hands of a tower kid. I can't give you 10,000 credits and call it a deal, he said. I can't fix what my family did with a job at your shop. I know, I said. He swallowed. But I can stay, he said. If you want me to, I can keep showing up. I can learn your storms. I looked at him. I thought of the night market, the chip, the way he'd snapped at the word pity. I thought of the barge raid, his voice saying my name like an anchor. I thought of my mother's stubborn courage and Juno's fierce loyalty and Nyla's bright posters. I thought of the sea, always listening, always charging, but also always carrying. I don't want a deal, I said. I want a choice. Elias nodded, eyes shining. Then choose, he whispered. I leaned in and kissed him, and it was not like a movie kiss under perfect lights. It was salty and shaky and real. It tasted like noodle soup and rain and relief. It tasted like the moment you realize survival is not the same as living. Later, when the dock grew quiet and the towers blinked across the water, I went back to my drawer and labeled a new tape. I wrote one word. Future. I pressed record and spoke into the hiss.